Hi, I'm Tash and welcome to today's crash course on Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. This year in literature, we've explored big ideas across different texts, Gwen Harper's poetry, challenged a patriarchal society and wrestled with existential questions and humanist experiences, while the Caucasian Chalk Circle and the Lost Honor of Caterina Blum both expose corruption and classist inequality. And of course, we've looked at dystopias before, like Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, which imagined a future where books are burned and independent thought is dangerous. Dystopias, after all, are imagined futures where things go terribly wrong, as opposed to right now. I've always found dystopias fascinating because they don't just scare us, they reveal how ideologies and values shape an entire society. They show us the dangers of normalizing oppressive systems, and they remind us how much power language, individuality, and perspective have. Which brings us to The Handmaid's Tale. Atwood began writing it in 1984, directly inspired by Orwell's 1984, but she wanted to imagine dystopia from a female perspective. And importantly, she made one rule for herself. Nothing in this novel could be invented. Every law, ritual, or punishment in Gilead had a real historical precedent. Today we're going to explore how Atwood constructs Gilead to expose the way powerful groups naturalize their values and ideologies while marginalizing others, as well as her use of narrative voice and genre conventions to shape our response. In other words, we'll be tackling two key syllabus dot points: the transmission of values and assumptions and the way literary form influences meaning. So, let's step into Gilead. Not literally, I hope. Before we dive into our analysis, let's take a moment to understand the world of Gilead. Gilead is a theocratic state built on the strictest interpretations of Christian fundamentalism. Much of the society's laws and rituals are designed to control women's bodies and privilege men and the ruling elite. Fertile women who are previously married, divorced, or otherwise seen as suitable for reproduction are forcibly made to be handmaids. Their sole purpose to bear children for commanders. They are a name for the men they serve. Atwood's protagonist, Offred, is literally of Fred, symbolizing both possession and her function as an offering. Other women occupy different, strictly defined roles, such as wives, econo-wives, Marthas, and aunts. Women are denied education, paid work, and political agency, and are forbidden from reading and writing. Atwood immerses the reader in mechanisms of oppression, giving us a lens through which to see how ideology shapes every aspect of life in Gilead. And yes, I said every aspect. I mean having to use butter as face cream. Every aspect. So, now that we understand the word of the text, let's take a look at the first syllabus dot point. I know, it's long, but let's quickly break it down. What is Atwood saying about society, power, gender, religion, freedom, etc., and how does she convey these values and ideologies in the text? We can use one keyword to summarize how she does all of this: Gilead. The fundamentalist and patriarchal values of Gilead reduce women to their biological functions, constructing reproduction as their sole identity and purpose. But what is fundamentalism? Funny you ask. Well, fundamentalism is the strict literal adherence to traditional religious beliefs and are often used to justify oppressive systems and alternative viewpoints. Anyways, back to the previous point. Through Offred's narration, we gain insight into the psyche of a handmaid. She states things like, I am a national resource and we are containers. It's only the inside of our bodies that are important. These metaphors display how women are constantly indoctrinated by authoritative figures such as aunts, telling them that they are just resources to be used and discarded. The constant belittlement and dehumanization has had an immense impact on Offred's psyche, highlighting how oppressive systems naturalize their indoctrination until others internalize it. Aunt Lydia says, "We were a society dying of too much choice." This is an attempt to villainize freedom. She also states, "This may not seem ordinary to you now, but after a time it will. It will become ordinary." This again encapsulates the manipulative behavior of authoritative figures and how they try to normalize their oppression that they inflict on others. Gilead is founded upon Christian fundamentalism, epitomized in the epigraph's allusion to Genesis chapter 30 verse 1, where Rachel declares to Jacob, "Give me children or else I die." By weaponizing scripture, the regime legitimizes patriarchal control, reducing women to their reproductive capacities and naturalizing oppression as divine will. We see this constantly throughout the novel, such as when the Beatitudes are read before the ceremony. One of these so-called Beatitudes are, "Blessed are the silent." I don't know about you, but I've never heard that Beatitude in my life. But how are women in this society supposed to question these made-up beliefs if the Bible is locked up? in a fundamentalist society. Ironic, I know. Atwood presents Gilead's worldview as one extreme but possible system of values: patriarchal, theocratic, authoritarian. Every detail about Gilead, as mentioned before, has a historical precedent. Religious fundamentalism reflects the Taliban rule in Afghanistan and Iran, a theocratic republic where the government is based on Islamic law. The surveillance and totalitarian control by the eyes and the guardians reflect Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, and other authoritarian regimes that monitored citizens' behavior. Atwood conveys values and assumptions through the structure, laws, and ideologies of Gilead, presenting a world where women's bodies are controlled and obedience is enforced, thereby reflecting a particular patriarchal or theocratic ideology. Atwood's Gilead serves as a chilling warning. Every aspect of this dystopia has a historical precedent. It compels readers to interrogate the corrupting allure of power and consider how easily could a society sanction such oppression. Okay, now that the first point is covered, let's move on to the next. Evaluate and reflect on how specific literary elements and forms shape meaning and influences responses. There are so many different ways in which Atwood shapes meaning and influences responses, such as narrative voice, structure, symbolism, imagery, motifs, language, irony, and setting. But for the sake of the time limit and your attention span, we'll just be focusing on narrative voice. Atwood uses first-person point of view to offer an insight into the female psyche in an oppressive, authoritarian, patriarchal society. Readers only have access to the information off-read supplies, which means we have a limited understanding on the contextual factors that led to Gilead. Thank goodness for Moira, am I right? Offred's perspective is constantly limited, not just by her gender and her role in society, but physically through what she's allowed to see. The wings she's enforced to wear blocks her vision, and she tells us, "We have learned to see the world in gaps." That image sums up her whole life in Gilead, fragmented, controlled, and always incomplete. Halfway through the novel, she admits, "All I need is perspective." But the irony is, the more she narrates, the less reliable her perspective becomes. Stories trail off, punctuation breaks down, and she constantly contradicts herself. Her narration starts to feel fractured, echoing the damage done to her own psyche. At times she cries, "Oh God, obliterate me," whilst at others she worries, "It's my fault, I'm forgetting too much." What's powerful here is that Offred knows she's unreliable. She tells us when she's changing the story, when she's too tired, when she's making things up. The shifting, unstable voice actually becomes some sort of quiet resistance. Because in a world like Gilead, refusing to give one single controlled version of events is its own kind of rebellion. Although her narration is unreliable, on the other hand, it shows the eroding nature of Gilead and the toll that it's had on her identity, actions, and thoughts. A powerful quote to encapsulate this, and personally my favorite quote in the whole novel: "I feel like the word shatter." And that's the thing with shattered glass. Even when you try to glue it back together, it's never whole again. People can see every crack, every fault line, every way in which you've been broken. And that's been the Handmaid's crash course. Don't forget,
Nolite de bastardes carborundorum.
Anyways, have a great day. Try to be kind. See ya.